You are entering a dimension of sound. You carefully come in through the threshold with wonder, yet skepticism. You see the faint shape of an outline of a robot arm petting a cat. You faintly hear the haunting sounds of a man playing a tambourine. The sound augments into two men playing with a soundboard. You're listening to Canary Cry News Talk. Stay a while and listen.
And now, where Nephilim news meets biblical views, you'll find broken memes and shattered dreams. Give it up for Basil and Guns.
Hey everybody, welcome to Canary Cry News Talk. It is February 26th, 2020, and this week, Mighty Corona and Fried Locust. My name is Gons. Basil is currently in the midst of the most epic life adventure journey ever, and in fact, our paths will cross if all goes to plan this upcoming weekend for an occasion that we will address sometime in the future. Don't worry, it's a really good thing. It's actually a very wonderful thing with Basil and what he's going through here. So just lay back, relax. This is episode 178. Basil will return, but in the meantime, I'll fly solo here for this episode and the extended report, and we'll just get right to it. We'll start with the Flippy update.
Flippy update.
Do you want fries with that?
And if you are a new listener, Flippy is the name of the colloquial robot arm that Basil so eloquently always puts it, is taking over our jobs and flirting with our spouses. What else does it do? You listeners know. You guys that have been around know what the whole tagline is. But this is the Flippy arms getting more senses. We've tracked these types of robots over the months and years of just development. And here's another example by Wired.com. This clever robotic finger feels with light. Interesting. Robots already have us beat in some ways. They're stronger, more consistent, and they never demand a lunch break. But when it comes to the senses, machines still struggle mightily. They can't smell particularly well or taste, though researchers are making progress on robotic tongues. Ugh. And actually, I think we've reported on robot arms that actually smell as well, maybe as recently as a couple weeks ago. But moving forward here, or feel with their robotic grips. And that's a serious consideration if we don't want them crushing our dishes or skulls. Yeah, thank you, Wired.com, for stating the obvious. We don't want these robots crushing skulls, but also not our dishes either. All right, interesting. In a lab at Columbia University, engineers have developed a strange yet clever way for robots to feel. Let's call it the finger of light. It's got a 3D printed skeleton embedded with 32 photodiodes and 30 adjacent LEDs, over which is laid a squishy skin of reflective silicone, which keeps the device's own light in and outside light out. When the robot finger touches an object, its soft exterior deforms, and the photodiodes in the skeleton detect changing light levels from the LEDs. This allows the system to determine where contact is being made with the finger and the intensity of that pressure. In other words, if you shook this robot's hand, it wouldn't feel it in a traditional sense. It would see it. Interesting. And this article is fairly long, and it gets into a lot of stuff about this robot finger thing, the ridiculous shaped finger sensor thing that's supposedly has the ability to sense with light. And it goes into machine learning as the main sort of progress being made in the last few years that made this possible. And there's a quote here by one of the people in the articles, quote, "So that's the missing piece," talking about machine learning. "The thing that's really become available to the field really in the last maybe 5 years or so," says C.O. Carley. "We now have the machine learning methods that we can add on top of these many, many optical signals so that we can decipher the information that's in there. which is interesting. So basically they were talking about how beforehand we can create these sensors in fingers or whatever and have them collect data, really just take down the data, but there was no way to sort the data and understand the data and translate that data into something that is, understandable, that is categorized and can be manipulated, understood, whatever it is. And now with machine learning, it's sort of built itself for us. It sort of figures out how or what it needs to quantify and what categories, what to label them. Obviously, there's human assistance in that, but we're at this point where now a finger that has a kind of a mesh silicon outer lining and the use of light can collect the data and determine how much pressure is being pushed and so forth. The weight of something, all those things that are analytical data, analysis type of stuff is able to process all the real world interactions with this robotic finger. So progress being made. Flippy, this isn't exactly Flippy, but the assumption is that once these types of things become more readily available and easier to, attach onto robot arms, whatever becomes the industry standard, so to speak, that sort of thing will become normal. Maybe all future flippy robot arm hands have these light fingers that can sense the weight and pressure of its surroundings so that it doesn't crush our skulls and, of course, our dishes. We don't want it to squish our dishes. Next up, and I really don't have a coronavirus jingle, although I do have a jingle for vaccines, which I don't know if it really applies per se, so I'm not going to really play it. But this, I thought it was a joke, but apparently this is real. This is KDVR.com. This is a Fox Denver outlet. CDC recommends men shave their beards to protect against coronavirus. And it says face masks and respirators are being used around the world in an effort to combat the massive global spread of the deadly coronavirus. The CDC cautions that facial hair can interfere with those devices. Now, as a male with facial hair, this is of interest to me. I sport a type of beard that I don't really keep in shape, but try to trim every once in a while. So I'm curious, am I more susceptible to the coronavirus because I have a beard? Well, let's find out here. The chart, which is hilarious, and this is why if you have the YouTube channel, go to the YouTube channel, because I'm screenshotting this whole recording, and so you'll see on screen, if you're watching this through the YouTube channel, the various okays and not okays for the types of facial hair men should have. And it's hilarious. I can't believe this is real. It actually has the CDC stamp of approval at the bottom and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. They're serious here. They really are wanting to make sure that if you have any kind of facial hair that falls in the category that is not good for preventing coronavirus or catching coronavirus, I guess you can judge them. I don't know. I guess, let's see, some of the ones that are okay, the ones that you can have, a clean shaven look, obviously, the soul patch, which is right under the chin there, side whiskers. So if you have a little bit of a sideburn thing going, you're okay. The pencil look, which is a very thin mustache, that's okay. And this one I thought was pretty creative on the part of the CDC over here. The toothbrush. If you have the toothbrush mustache, you're in the clear. You're okay. But as anyone that can see the toothbrush design, it's the Hitler stash. That's what it is. They've cleverly called it the toothbrush, and it's okay. You will not catch coronavirus if you sport a toothbrush mustache. And there's others, lampshade, Zorro, villain, no good on the Fu Manchu, no good on Van Dyke Imperial, mutton chops, stubble. You can't have stubble. Interesting. Stubble is no good. And again, I invite you to go look at the chart if you are at all curious about yourself or a loved one that may sport some facial hair, make sure that they have a design, a facial facial hair design that falls under the category of a green check mark according to the CDC. Hey, you know what? The walrus is an okay look. So maybe I'll go with the walrus. I'll shave everything off except the stash and let it grow into the walrus design. All right, anyway. Thought it was kind of a fun thing there for coronavirus. Not really anything too serious because, it's just a lot of fear-mongering out there. So I thought I'd just bring a little lightheartedness to it. And I thought it was a joke, but I guess it wasn't. Everything seems like a joke now. You can't tell what's true, what's not, what's parody, what's not. It's all kind of blending into this crazy mess. TulsaWorld.com. Meet President Trump's Republican competition on Tuesday's primary ballot in Oklahoma. On Tuesday, March 3rd, Oklahoma voters will have their choice of 14 Democrat and 6 Republican candidates for president on the primary ballots. Here's a look at the 5 Republicans who are going up against President Trump. And right there, number 1, Zoltan, President 2020, Upgrading America. And there's not much on him. There's just a link to his website, the Zoltan2020.com, which we've been tracking Zoltan in his political move to step away from the actual transhumanist party and deciding to run with the Republican Party and basically push the whole transhumanist agenda there, which is an interesting move because, again, we've mentioned it before. He was on a show with Derek Gilbert a while ago on A View from the Bunker. And on the show, he sort of shared or expressed just, his more, I can't remember what it was exactly. I think it was some kind of socialist or fascist type of view or perspective. And it was kind of startling. But in any case, that being said, Zoltan running as a Republican, it's interesting. We've tracked the verbiage change and some of the ways he frames the issues and his policies and things of that nature. So just keeping track of that, keeping an update. But let's move on because we got a lot to get to with this main article here.
Welcome to Chinese News!
That's our Chinese update. Gotta love it. We always love to go to really, really reliable sources. And that's kind of a joke, but it's not. But at the same time, we go outside the mainstream media headlines and stuff sometimes to pull in stories and discuss them because they're relevant information and relevant things going on. This is breakingisraelnews.com. And the headline, not just coronavirus, China hit with other biblical plagues. Micah's end of days prophecy, says Rabbi. And there's a little quote of Ezekiel 30, verse 16. I will set fire to Egypt. Sin shall writhe in anguish, and no shall be torn apart, and Noph shall face adversaries in broad daylight. And that's the Israel Bible. That's probably why I did not recognize the way that was written there. It says here, everyone has heard of the coronavirus, but the truth is that China is in the midst of dealing with a wave of several plagues. Several rabbis see this as a replay of the plagues in Egypt in a pre-messianic manner and place. And it goes into some of the prophecies or the thought here of the rabbis. One particular rabbi, 2 weeks ago, Yosef Pinto, an internationally acclaimed Israeli mystic rabbi who currently lives in Morocco, made a statement about the coronavirus hitting China. The rabbi cited the prophet Ezekiel as his source. And it says here in modern Hebrew, sin is the name for China. And I don't want to necessarily get into the coronavirus thing here because it's kind of obvious. Like, all right, there's stuff happening there that everyone sort of knows and is being bombarded with all that anyway. So I'm just going to move on from that and go into the section labeled Locust. Locusts, plural. The biblical plague that once left Egypt, bereft and barren, is threatening to hit China. East Africa has already been overrun by a swarm of desert locusts, creating famine in regions already living on the edge of starvation. The swarm of locusts is the largest suffered by the region in several decades. A square mile of a swarm can be formed by up to 210 million locusts, which can eat as much food as 90,000 people in a day. Huge swarms are highly mobile, able to travel up to 90 miles a day if wind conditions are in their favor. Scientists blame unusual weather patterns, bringing rains and cyclones that generate intensive breeding cycles. China has a long and bitter history of locust swarms, with more than 840 being recorded in the official records over the past 2,700 years. The Chinese government has tried to dismiss the threat, with Global Times, a governance news service, reporting that, quote, there is little chance of a locust plague expanding in China. The government suggested that concerned farmers should raise ducks and chickens to control any locusts that come their way. To illustrate the point, the Farmland Division of the government released 1,000 duck troops to protect the Xinjiang border. Okay, the government did not mention that the species of locust that is threatening China emits phenylacetonatrite, totally butchering it. Phenylacetonatril, a foul-smelling secretion that is meant to deter predators. Birds typically do not seek them out as a food source. The article also suggested that locusts could be fried and consumed by people, noting that some farmers considered the plague of locusts to actually be a blessing. Oh my gosh, that is the best thing ever. I don't know if the author here realized what was being said here or reported here, but that is fantastic. It's like, oh, don't worry about the locust. Actually, we can fry them and eat them. It's fantastic. Quote, our corn harvest would be reduced for sure, but catching locusts brought me a lot more money, an anonymous villager told the Beijing News. Is this all propaganda? Or in actuality, are they down to eat the fried locust over there in China? And so a big locust swarm is like, hey, time to eat. Locusts are on restaurant menus in many regions in China. Fresh or frozen locusts are priced from 17 to 400 yuan per kilogram, which is about $2.43, depending on different species and characteristics. Oh, how about the ones directly caught out of the plague? You know, just this is a plague locust. You know, fried plague locusts in a batch, in a giant bag. Oh my gosh, that's just ridiculous. I think it's hilarious, and you know, maybe there's something biblical going on here with all that, but just the fact that they would even report this, and if there's any truth to it, the thought of these people, you know, the whole world saying, you know, that it's biblical.
It's got to be biblical.
And, you know, people in China saying, actually, no, eating time. You know, it's just a ridiculous thing. Ridiculous thing we live in. The article goes on. There's a segment called Bubonic Plague, and it talks about doctors preventing or struggling to prevent the bubonic plague from bursting out these last, I guess, few years or so, few months, which I didn't know about. And then it mentions the American swine flu because China is a big pork consumer, and the plagues of Egypt in China. And it says here, according to Jewish tradition, the 10 plagues will reappear before the Messiah. Rabbi Yosef Berger, the rabbi of King David's tomb on Mount Zion, explained this aspect of the messianic process to Breaking Israel News, quoting the prophet Micah, quote, I will show him wondrous deeds as in the days when you sallied forth from the land of Egypt. Micah 7:15. Quote, all of the miracles will reappear, all of the plagues, the entire story, in all its pain and all its glory, Rabbi Berger said. But before the Messiah, more plagues that were not seen in Egypt will appear. This is in preparation for the war of Gog and Magog, in which God will play an active role using the awesome forces of nature as his legions. He goes on, before he reveals the Messiah, God will show his awesome glory as it has not been seen since the 6 days of creation. We cannot even imagine what will be. Interesting stuff that the rabbi is saying here, a lot of supernaturalism that he is suggesting we are going to witness as part of the coming of the Messiah. For them, for these rabbis, may be the Antichrist according to believers. And that's a very, very contentious point, but we've been talking about it for a few years now, and it seems to be that is in the cards, so to speak, in terms of how things might play out and why prophecy is written in the ways that it is, and why certain early church fathers and the commentary they gave on certain issues regarding the man of sin was labeled as anti-Semitic, and certainly there has been horrible things done because of some of that theology, and so nobody is clean here. No, there's not one righteous, no, not one. So I'm not saying one group is clean and one isn't. It's kind of like, hey, we're all in this, and no matter where you sit in that whole discussion. So it's not really, again, a one's better than the other, but it's a situation where we have to keep an eye on. And it seems like, I guess these rabbis have always talked big, but they are considerably talking bigger, it seems, more and more as time goes on. So we just wanted to keep track of that and let you guys know that that's what's happening as well. And this next story I wanted to mention, it's kind of a Nephilim update. So let me just play the jingle for the Nephilim update, and then we will move on from there.
Nephilim update, Nephilim update, Nephilim update.
So this is a story by Oculus.com. Actually, you know what? There's a different story. Bloomberg. Bloomberg is the one that it's my gateway into all the other links that I found. But this is a story that says Facebook is buying another virtual reality game studio. And it says Facebook Inc. said it has acquired development studio Sanzaru Games to join the Oculus Gaming Group inside its virtual reality division. Sanzaru, which Zaru, like Saru, is means monkey in Japanese. So Sanzaru, maybe 3 monkeys. Interesting. Has produced a number of games, including from the Sonic the Hedgehog and Marvel Studios franchises, according to its website. The studio's most popular VR game, Asgard's Wrath, was highly reviewed at the time of its release in October and was included in several Games of the Year lists. And I wanted to play a little trailer for the actual game, Asgard's Wrath, because it's really interesting who you play. And remember, this is like a virtual reality thing. The visuals, if you're watching the video, you'll see kind of the god hands that you have. You're playing a giant. You're literally playing like a giant Nephilim. And you're basically this god that fights. And I'm just going to play the trailer here.
Mine is no ordinary forge. And this is no ordinary steel.
Some artwork forming on the swords.
You may be a god, but to become legend, you must do battle as mortal heroes. A spellcaster who wields arcane powers.
So some magic there.
A rogue, fearless in the face of danger. A warrior, fueled by vengeance.
A female character there. It's a pretty gruesome game.
Call upon your immortal power to transform beasts into companions. For none can survive this path alone. Destiny waits for no one. Not even a god. Answer the call, Asgardian. Eternal glory awaits.
So again, this is Asgard's Wrath, and battle as mortals, rise as a god. I mean, if you can't, and again, this is with Oculus. If you don't know what's going on with the propaganda being pushed here for people that are on the bleeding edge of some of these games and some of these platforms, then you're probably not really paying attention, because now that Facebook has this, it makes sense, right? That they would push this idea of a game, or buy up a company that published a game, the most popular game, about playing a giant Nephilim. You're literally a Nephilim and being touted as gods. It's literally the biblical narrative of the enemies of God and his people. And it's being, and you get to play the enemy, and the enemy is the good guy in these types of platforms and games. So you can tell that they're building the sympathy for the devil, as we always talked about here. So bottom line here with this Nephilim update, again, we're going to rebuke them.
I rebuke thee.
There you have it. And I'm going to call it an episode. It might be a little bit short, but because I'm running solo and I also have an extended report coming up here, I'm just going to cut it off. But in the meantime, make sure to tell your friends about this podcast, because we're approaching 200 episodes and we're really just bringing you news that you're not going to get anywhere else, and a collection of news through the biblical worldview grounded in scripture, trying to bring you information that's interesting, that's not really related to politics. Although again, we touch on it every once in a while to, just because the topics of transhumanism and technology and science and all these things are starting to trickle into the realm of politics more and more. But in the meantime, one great way to support us is to tell your friends about the podcast, friends and family, introduce them to the show. Here we call it rattling their cage.
I want to shake things up, stir up some controversy, rattle a few cages. Hey, stop that! You'll never silence me. I'm the last angry man, a crusader for the little guy. Leave the bird alone. Never. Rattle a few cages. Rattle a few cages.
Look it up.
Look it up. Yeah, look it up. Look it up. CanaryCryNewsTalk.com, or you can go to Patreon.com and go to actually Patreon.com/CCNT, and there you can find the extended reports, of which I think we are going into our 115th extended report here. So that's quite a bit of extra stuff that's there in the Canary Cry News Talk Patreon. For this episode, we're going to talk about the 10 technologies for the future, according to Interesting Engineering. The studies being done about the unconscious brain, which I thought was very interesting. And retail madness, according to Forbes, machine learning and more AI and VR, and how it's affecting retail and whatever else happens to come up during that time. So thank you guys for listening to this episode of Canary Cry News Talk. Until next time, think outside the cage.
Where are the aliens?